The tourist crossed the line, challenging the royal guard, convinced that money gave him the right to do anything. With a contemptuous smirk and a beer bottle in hand, he attempted to humiliate a symbol of British honor. The crowd held its breath, waiting for a response. But no one, not even the tourist himself, was prepared for what happened next. That day became a lesson he would never forget. London, morning. The air is filled with the aroma of coffee from takeaway cups and the lingering dampness after the night's rain. In front of Buckingham Palace, a crowd of tourists gathers, each feeling obligated to take 100 photos to show their friends. Look, I was here. Cameras click, voices blend into a multi-toned hum, and amidst this chaos, standing like an immovable bastion, is Jonathan Ridley. Tall and imposing, clad in a red uniform with golden buttons, his face stern, his posture unwavering. He seems like a frozen extension of the palace itself. His bearskin hat towers above the crowd, and his gray-blue eyes stare through people as if they don't exist. He is not here for entertainment. He is here for honor and tradition. The crowd bustles. Someone nervously adjusts their umbrella. Someone cheerfully waves at the guard, receiving nothing but indifference in return, while others simply gaze in admiration at the ceremonial sentinel. And then he appears, the one who believes rules don't apply to him. A tourist in a baseball cap with a provocative slogan, wearing sunglasses and ridiculous shorts adorned with the British flag. In one hand, a bottle of cheap beer. In the other, a smartphone, ready to capture his next viral video. He radiates confidence, acting as if he's the star of his own movie. "Hey, buddy, smile for once." His voice cuts through the air, drawing nervous giggles from the crowd. He points his phone at Jonathan, clearly expecting an epic reaction. But nothing. Silence. The guard remains unfazed. The crowd holds its breath in anticipation. Will anything happen? A little girl in a pink raincoat clutches her mother's hand and whispers fearfully, "Mom, is he bad?" The mother shakes her head, casting a reproachful glance at the tourist. "Some people just don't understand." The tourist, undeterred, steps closer. Too close. He smirks and sneers at the guard. "Why so serious? I'm spending money here. Come on, put on a show." His voice drips with disdain and a reckless sense of impunity. He takes a long swig of beer, looking around smugly, and then, suddenly, the bottle slips from his hand. The shattering glass pierces the air. The crowd gasps. Shards scatter across the cobblestones, landing right at Jonathan's feet. A few tense seconds. He doesn't move. Not a muscle on his face twitches. Only the keenest observer might notice the slight tightening of his jaw, an almost imperceptible reprimand. "Well done. Now what?" mutters an irritated voice from the crowd. An elderly woman in a wheelchair, who had been quietly watching, slowly shakes her head. Disappointment flickers in her eyes. But the tourist doesn't stop. He shrugs, trying to turn the situation into a joke. "Oops. Happens. You're a soldier, right? You'll clean it up, yeah?" Jonathan remains motionless, unmoved, but inside he's already preparing for the tourist's next move. The man, emboldened by the crowd's expectations, takes a step forward, crossing the line. The tourist stands just a few steps away from Jonathan, staring at the shattered bottle with a look of mild confusion, as if he doesn't quite understand what just happened. Then, shrugging and smirking, he says, "Oops, happens to the best of us." His voice carries a tone of casual indifference, as if this were nothing more than a minor inconvenience, something hardly worth anyone's attention. He waves his hand dismissively, brushing off the incident. Just a bottle. What's the big deal? Another trivial moment in his carefree vacation. The crowd, however, sees it differently. A low murmur of discontent spreads through the onlookers. "No respect at all these days," an elderly man in a gray coat exclaims indignantly. Nearby, the woman in the wheelchair slowly shakes her head, a hint of sadness in her voice. There was a time when people like him wouldn't have even been allowed to stand here. But the tourist either doesn't notice, or pretends not to notice, the disapproving glances surrounding him. He stands tall, believing everything here exists for him. He pulls out his phone, stepping even closer to the guardsman, and smirks. "Come on, what are you going to do? Can't talk, huh? Afraid to say something?" The clicking of cameras grows louder. People are recording every second. The tension thickens. Some are hoping for a scandal. Others are already crafting captions for their soon-to-be viral videos. The tourist, clearly reveling in the attention, acts as if he's filming an episode of his personal reality show, where he's the star and the guardsman is merely a prop. Jonathan remains motionless, but an observant eye might catch the way his right hand grips his rifle just a little tighter. The line has been crossed. An officer stationed nearby steps forward, watching the situation intently, ready to intervene. But Jonathan's gaze remains cold and unwavering. Encouraged by the audience, the tourist takes another step forward. He leans in, his sunglasses nearly brushing against the guardsman's stoic face, grinning wider. "Come on, man. I'm paying here. At least do something." Seriously? Does he really think this man is some sort of performer, here to entertain him? Someone in the crowd scoffs. "What a joke! Just leave already." But the tourist doesn't hear. Or rather, he hears, but chooses to ignore it. To him, this is a game, a chance to prove something, to show he's in control. In his world, money grants him the right to anything, even disrespect. The crowd's mood shifts. What started with a few chuckles now turns into palpable disapproval. People realize he's pushed too far. But will he have the sense to back down? Jonathan remains as still as ever, not flinching even for a second. His sheer presence, his unwavering silence, it begins to weigh on the tourist. After all, he needs a reaction, any reaction. But all he sees is his own arrogance reflected back at him in eyes that don't even acknowledge his existence. "Dude, he's tougher than you thought, huh?" A teenager in the crowd teases sarcastically, causing the tourist to falter for a brief moment. But his pride won't let him back down. He takes yet another step forward. The tourist smirks smugly, looking at the guardsman as if he's nothing more than an attraction, an entertainer meant to amuse him and the crowd. He's already gearing up for his next joke, when, suddenly, an elderly man steps forward from the crowd. His posture is straight, his stride confident, and the medals on his faded military coat glint faintly in the morning light. A hush falls over the square, broken only by the veteran's resolute footsteps on the cobblestones. "Young man." His voice is calm, but there's steel beneath the surface. "You stand before a symbol of something you can't possibly understand. This is honor, duty, time-honored tradition. If you cannot respect that, leave." The crowd freezes. Cameras that had been focused on the guardsman now zoom in on the veteran's lined face, capturing every wrinkle, every hint of emotion. His gaze is firm, filled with the quiet indignation of someone who remembers a time when such behavior was unthinkable. Nearby, the woman in the wheelchair nods approvingly, as if silently saying, "Finally." The tourist blinks, staring at the veteran with a flicker of confusion. He clearly hadn't expected anyone to call him out. For a brief moment he looks unsure of himself, but then, in an attempt to regain control, he forces a grin. "Hey, old man, I'm just joking around. No need to be so serious." But the crowd is no longer on his side. Disapproving murmurs ripple through the onlookers. "That's exactly the kind of people we need more of," someone calls out. "We need more gentlemen like him." The tourist feels the shift. This is no longer just a silly show with an unflinching guardsman. It's turning into a stage where he's the villain. He tries to laugh it off, but suddenly, a sound cuts through the tension like a thunderclap. The guardsman steps forward, a precise, deliberate step, as if struck by a metronome. The sharp clack of his boot against the stone echoes across the square. The tourist stumbles back instinctively, his confidence cracking. His eyes dart around, seeking support from the crowd. But instead of encouraging smiles, he finds only cold stares and cameras still recording. His face flushes red, and he stammers something, but his words drown in the murmuring crowd. "That's it," someone remarks sarcastically. The crowd hums with approval. A few people even clap. The veteran nods respectfully at the guardsman, a silent exchange of mutual recognition. And in that moment, the truth finally dawns on the tourist. He's lost. Not to the guardsman, not to the veteran, but to himself. Lowering his phone, he stuffs it into his pocket and slowly backs away, avoiding eye contact with the people around him. The woman in the wheelchair watches him leave and murmurs quietly, "There was a time they wouldn't have even been allowed this close." Jonathan, steadfast as ever, resumes his position as if nothing had happened. But something has changed in the air. Respect. The cameras now capture the scene with a newfound sense of reverence. The laughter is gone, replaced by an awareness of what they've just witnessed. Somewhere in the crowd, a whisper is heard. "These guys deserve more respect than we give them." And this video will spread across the internet. The tourist stumbles backward, the smug grin vanishing from his face. He feels the weight of hundreds of disapproving gazes, like harsh spotlights exposing his complete helplessness and foolishness. The crowd is no longer laughing. The cameras are still pointed at him, but now not for amusement. He has become a living example of what happens when you cross the line. Somewhere in the crowd, a sarcastic voice rings out, "Well, did you get your show?" The tourist swallows nervously. He crouches down, hurriedly gathering the shards of the broken bottle, his fingers trembling and fumbling against the rough cobblestones. A woman in the crowd shakes her head in quiet disapproval, muttering under her breath, "Shame. Just pure shame." The murmur in the crowd grows, swelling into a quiet but undeniable wave of indignation. People exchange glances, some still filming, others shaking their heads. Even those who had been chuckling earlier now feel a pang of embarrassment for having watched this spectacle unfold. Finally, the tourist stands up, casting a desperate glance at Jonathan, silently pleading for some kind of leniency. But the guardsman remains as motionless as ever. His face is unreadable, his gaze fixed straight ahead. The only sign of his unseen victory is a subtle movement, his hand adjusting the pristine white strap across his chest. The woman in the wheelchair, who had been watching intently, speaks in a near whisper, yet her words carry more weight than any loud complaint. "That's how it should be." And then, suddenly, applause breaks out. At first it's hesitant, soft and scattered, but it quickly swells into a louder, more confident ovation. Some clap in admiration, others in relief, knowing that justice has been served in the simplest, yet most profound way. Phones buzz with notifications as the video uploads to social media, headlines flashing across screens. "Guardsman teaches a lesson in respect. British honor versus tourist arrogance." The tourist, red-faced and humiliated, hurriedly slips away into the crowd. But it's too late. The internet never forgets. He no longer feels like the king of the moment. He now understands that money and a tourist pass do not grant him the right to everything. The crowd gradually disperses, leaving behind only impressions and a newfound wave of respect for tradition. Jonathan, as if nothing had happened, remains steadfast at his post. His figure stands tall, his posture impeccable. Time falls back into the rhythm of royal protocol. The wind gently flutters the ribbon on his strap, and he remains, a timeless symbol of honor and resilience. And as a passerby walks by, they whisper to themselves, more than to anyone else, This is the real Britain."